Gentleman from Colorado is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we continue to wade through these massive and costly spending bills, my commitment to the American taxpayer remains strong. I signed a pledge to vote to uphold a presidential veto of any spending bill that exceeds the president's requested level of funding. Hopefully, we can contain some of this out-of-control spending and pass fiscally responsible legislation, but if not, I intend to honor that pledge. This appropriations bill would increase spending for energy and water projects by $1.1 billion more than the president's budget request, and seeks to increase spending by more than $1.3 billion over last year's fiscal 07 energy and water appropriation bill. We have an opportunity to demonstrate restraint by reducing the amount that the government spends, not increasing it. At a time when the federal government faces an $8.8 trillion national debt, we have a real opportunity to show the American people that we can be fiscally disciplined and that we will reduce this deficit. Increasing the size of government or bureaucracy will not help this reduction effort. My common sense amendment would simply maintain the policy and administration account under the Bureau of Reclamation at fiscal year 2007 levels, representing a $1.2 million reduction from $58.8 to $57.6 million. That's the same as last year's budget. Given that this funding level was appropriate for last year's budget and our nation needs to reduce federal spending, this common sense restraint should be acceptable. This amendment is not critical of Bureau of Reclamation or its employees who actually help deliver water to parts of my district and are important to the state of Colorado and to the entire West. It's simply requiring the federal government to operate the way any deficit-laden business would. A private sector company experiencing the same deficits the federal government is facing would not increase its deficit. It would simply cut spending or go out of business. A family on a tight budget finds ways to go without, and we should explore every opportunity to be fiscally responsible as well. This amendment is the first step of many necessary steps in forcing fiscal discipline and sanity upon the federal government and out-of-control federal deficit spending. We must restore fiscal discipline and assure the American people that we are doing whatever is necessary to reduce our national debt. To do this, we must find common sense and innovative new ways to do more with less. The American people have asked Congress to rein in federal spending and tighten its belt. This reasonable amendment does just that, and I urge its adoption. And Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
Now, the good gentleman from Colorado comes up with an amendment to try to address that. If we're able to hold the line overall on spending, just as an average family would have to do, we would not see the need for this, the largest tax increase in American history. And what does the good gentleman from Colorado do, Mr. Lamborn? Well, he simply says, hold the line on spending. How many Americans saw their income rise last year by 2.5 times the rate of inflation? I can tell you quite candidly, most of the people that I talk to in my district, unfortunately, did not see their incomes rise that much. But yet, that's what we're asking them to do in the sense of higher taxes to pay for the increase in spending for the overall budget that we have here. Let me just conclude by, in the same way that the gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Lamborn, does in his letter. He says, and I think these are my most poignant words, we must restore fiscal discipline and assure the American people that we are doing whatever is necessary to reduce our national debt. And to do this, we must find the common sense and innovative ways to do more with less.
You know, it's amazing if, Mr. Speaker, if folks on the other side keep saying tax increase, they're actually going to believe that there's a tax increase. What I notice is that they very rarely mention deficit, because when they do, they leave themselves open for discussion on the deficit. Yes, there is a deficit, and the American people are quickly finding that out. But the deficit was not created in the last less than 6 months the Democrats have had control of this House. The deficit was created by taking us into a war that we shouldn't have been involved in, where close to $600 billion have been spent. But again, we're not going to hear that. What we're going to hear is this repetition about how money's being spent and that there is a tax increase. I don't remember a tax increase in the 6 months that we have been here as Democrats. What I do remember that caused a deficit was, one, the war, and two, that we did have a tax decrease in this country, a tax cut. We did. But it wasn't for anybody that we know, certainly no one I know. It was for millionaires and zillionaires.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank the gentleman from California. And to put things in perspective, to my colleague from New York, it's true that the war in Iraq has cost $600 billion. That is 7% of the $8.8 trillion total national debt that we have. So we have to also address the remaining 93% of the debt, because the war is 7% out of that $8.8 trillion. So getting back to this amendment that's before us, I would differ with my colleague from New York. We are not cutting any research into energy development. We are cutting the bureaucracy expense. We're cutting the policy and administration portion of the Bureau of Reclamation, and we're just keeping it to last year's dollar amount. So the bureaucracy, the administration of the Bureau of Reclamation is what's being kept to last year's figures. There's no cut going on for any research or development program whatsoever. So I just wanted to make that correction. Apparently I haven't won over my colleague from New York yet, but I would urge everyone else here to adopt this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.